what does your supply chain look like for a given product? Let's take an example. Let's say you buy a fixture for lighting products, SKU ABC, made in Vietnam. Okay. Now, what is going on under the surface? So maybe you are buying this from a manufacturer in Hai Phong, Vietnam, but this is your tier 1 supplier. Who are the tier 2 suppliers, tier 3, and so on and so forth? All right. This is a simple way that we found pretty useful to think of the supply chain. So this fixture has some parts in aluminum, iron, plastic, some screws, some pieces of glass, and some packaging. It's a little bit simplified, but these are really the main components. It's useful to think also of the surface treatment, because this is often done in a separate place. For example, the aluminum parts, after they are cast or extruded or forged, and there's some machining, well, what happens very often, they are sent to powder coating somewhere outside, right? And same thing here for the iron parts and so on and so forth, right? It might be plated, maybe anodized, and so on. The glass, there's maybe some coating, there's probably some heat treatment. Okay, so very often there's this layer here of surface treatment. One layer down is the processing. So there's some fabrication, some machining, whatever, right? So the plastic parts here might be molded, injection molded at high pressure, okay, if it's thermoplastics, all right? And same thing, it might be cast, extruded, forged, stamped, bent, melted, whatever. And then often, especially for metal parts, there's often some machining, maybe drilling some holes and so on and so forth, maybe some polishing and so on. Okay, glass in itself is a pretty special process, so it's refined, it's melted, and so on. And this might be in 2 or 3 different facilities, right? And in some cases, it's not really clear. If you really don't have much clue about what happens with glass, then you can do a little bit of research and keep going. But it's better to say, to be searched later rather than just give up. When you don't know something, you put a question mark. Okay. And this is for packaging. So it's printed, it's cut, but before that, well, there's a paper mill churning out these the cardboard and the paper and so on. And then, so that's why there's 2 levels here of processing. Very often you can think of this, well, before the aluminum can be cast and machined, well, hey, there's a foundry involved to make the alloy that will then be reheated to melt it and to cast it and so on, right? So very often there's 2 levels of processing, and it's a little bit artificial. Could be more than 2, of course. All right, and then all the way at the bottom, it's very interesting to think of what raw materials are involved. So for all of the metal parts, there's mining, right, and probably some pre-processing. Okay, so it's basically extracted from the ground. All right, the plastic parts, well, the main raw material is oil, so it has to be drilled, and again, there's some pre-processing. Again, this processing, these 2 steps are very artificial. In some cases, this would be a dozen different steps, actually. Same thing for screws, because it's metal also, and so on. Okay, and then packaging, well, the paper packaging at least, well, some trays have to be logged, right? And maybe some of it is logged in FSC forests, and then all of the chain here, all of the companies are FCC certified, and then you can really say, okay, this is a certified package, FSC certified packaging. If it's not the full chain here that's certified, then you cannot really say that. It could be recycled. It could be some other things, right? So don't take this as a starting point and just use this sort of approach. It could be different. But really, this is an interesting way of looking at it. It's also interesting to know where it's taking place. So maybe this fixture is made in Vietnam. Well, where are all of these parts coming from? Maybe only the iron parts are coming also from Vietnam. Maybe all the rest is coming from South China or even North China. This is actually quite common. It's something we see very often. It might be difficult to go beyond the tier 2 suppliers for this information. And maybe you don't know the exact name of the company, but at least you can know, okay, this is made in Guangdong province. Okay, where? In Dongguan city. Okay, then you have an idea. And then if you know that all of Dongguan is locked down, for example, or a large part in a certain area is flooded, then you know there's a risk and you might be impacted. Okay. And in terms of environmental impact, well, just by looking at this kind of chart, which, by the way, anybody with some experience in manufacturing can put together, even if it's not all confirmed and verified and so on, it's a very good way of starting to look at, for example, painting. Well, what about the release in the air? What about the release into the water? Plating. How is it treated after that? Is it just released into the water system and so on? Anything that consumes an enormous amount of energy, such as the foundries here, are definitely high-risk places, or something that's very highly pollutant, like plastic pellet manufacturing, especially for some plastics like PVC. Well, that might be a problem. Okay, so you can start to look at these different steps here and see which ones are most likely to have a high environmental impact. And if you are doing a life cycle assessment at some point, an LCA, well, this is where you need to look at in priority. Okay, well, I hope this was useful to give you a preliminary idea about how to draw a supply chain map. And again, you need to start from one product or maybe a family of products that have this sort of supply chain here that's very similar, because then below is probably also relatively similar.